President Vladimir Putin feels insulted by allegations of Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. election, Donald Trump has said after meeting him briefly at an Asia-Pacific summit in Vietnam. He said he absolutely did not meddle in our election, the U.S. leader said. Mr. Trump, who defeated Democratic rival Hillary Clinton, said the allegations were a Democratic hit job. The U.S. intelligence community concluded earlier that Russia had indeed tried to sway the poll in favor of Mr. Trump. The U.S. Justice Department has appointed Special Investigator Robert Mueller to examine any possible collusion involving Mr. Trump's team, and legal action has already been taken against several former aides. Who's who in the drama to end all dramas? What are the allegations against Russia? President Trump has refused to acknowledge a reported assessment by the CIA and other intelligence agencies that Russia was behind the hacking of the Democratic National Committee, DNC, in the run-up to last year's presidential election. The contents of the emails, passed to WikiLeaks and posted online, were embarrassing to the Democrats and shook up the presidential campaign, which ended in defeat for Hillary Clinton. In addition to the Mueller inquiry, congressional committees have been set up to carry out their own investigations. Relations between the U.S. and Russia have been strained for years, with the Kremlin long accusing Washington of seeking to sway elections in Russia and other ex-Soviet states including Ukraine and Georgia. While Russian hackers are widely suspected of involvement, there has been no conclusive link to the Kremlin. Denying that Russia had tried to interfere last year by fostering contacts with Mr. Trump's campaign, Mr. Putin told reporters in Vietnam, "Everything about the so-called Russian dossier in the U.S. is a manifestation of a continuing domestic political struggle." Russia, the cloud over the White House. 18 revelations from WikiLeaks emails. Russia's cyber war against the West. What does Mr. Trump say to the allegations? He said he believed Mr. Putin had been very insulted by the allegations and that was not a good thing for America. He, Putin, said he didn't meddle, he added. I asked him again. Asked if he believed Mr. Putin, he replied, he is very, very strong in the fact that he didn't do it. You have President Putin very strongly, vehemently says he has nothing to do with that. Now, you are not going to get into an argument, you are going to start talking about Syria and the Ukraine. Presentational gray line. Trump out on a limb again. Ali Makboul, BBC News, Da Nang. Donald Trump once again goes against the findings of his own intelligence agencies. Because although the U.S. Justice Department is investigating the scale and nature of Russian interference in the election of 2016, and any links to the Trump campaign, the American intelligence community has already long determined that Russia did, indeed, interfere. Yet Mr. Trump suggested this story was not only entirely fabricated by his political opponents, it might even be costing lives in Syria, because it is getting in the way of his relationship with the Russian president and hampering their ability to help solve the conflict together. People will die because of it, and it's a pure hit job, and it's artificially induced and that's a shame, he said. It is hard to know what the president hopes to achieve with this type of rhetoric. The investigation goes on. Presentational gray line. How did the two presidents get on in Vietnam? Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin met for the first time in July at a G20 summit in the German city of Hamburg. In Da Nang they were seen chatting briefly on 3 occasions within 24 hours during the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation (APEC) summit. However, they had no formal bilateral meeting, with Mr. Putin blaming it on scheduling and protocol. They had warm words for each other, with the U.S. president talking of their mutual very good feeling and the Russian leader describing his counterpart as well-mannered and comfortable to deal with. They did manage to sign off a statement vowing to continue the battle against so-called Islamic State in Syria until the militants are defeated and calling for a political solution to the conflict. How far has U.S. Justice Department investigation progressed? Last month, Former Trump campaign advisor George Papadopoulos pleaded guilty to having lied to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, about the timing of meetings with alleged go-betweens for Russia. He testified that Russian nationals had contacted him in an attempt to gain influence with the Trump campaign, offering dirt in the form of thousands of emails on Mrs. Clinton in April 2016, 2 months before the DNC emails were leaked. Mr. Trump has played down the importance of Mr. Papadopoulos, calling him a low-level volunteer and liar. On Saturday, Mr. Putin brushed aside U.S. media reports that a woman wrongly identified by Mr. Papadopoulos as the Russian president's niece had offered to help broker meetings with Kremlin officials. "I do not know anything about it and I think it is just some fantasies," Mr. Putin said. Mr. Trump's former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, and an associate were also placed under house arrest on charges of money laundering as a result of the Mueller inquiry, but the charges do not relate to the election. What do ex-aides charges mean for Trump?